Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the ADSI PEP Summer webinar for LASO. We're going to go ahead and let folks get a chance to get to join here. So we get started in probably 30 seconds or a minute. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome everyone to the Additional Days School Year Planning and Execution Program Summer webinar. This is for the Learning Acceleration Support Opportunities Grant. And in case you don't quite yet know the lingo, that full name we lovingly refer to as ADSI PEP Summer. So as I go throughout this presentation, I'll be saying ADSI PEP Summer. That just means Additional Days School Year Planning and Execution Program Summer. My name is Brian Doran. I'm the Director of Expanded Learning Models here at TEA. My team looks at all things extra time and how are we supporting districts in implementation of different funding sources and different opportunities with extra time. Today, we'll walk through a number of different things. First is those quick welcome and introductions, and we'll talk through an overview of the application process and timeline. Basically, what is LASO? What does it mean for application process? Then we'll dive in deeper into ADSI PEP Summer's program description, eligibility, key commitments, scoring, interview criteria, all of those different pieces that you'll need to know about before making a decision about if this is right for you or not. And then we'll close out with any next steps and have some opportunity at the end for Q&A. Please do use the Q&A box in Zoom in your interface there for asking any questions. I'll try to monitor as I'm going throughout the course of this session, any questions that pop in for real-time answers, but really at the end of the session, we'll definitely have some time for more targeted response time there. We're also recording this right now. We will be posting both the recording as well as the slides themselves on the LASO website at the end of this week. So once all of our webinar options have been conducted, we'll be posting all of the slides and recordings on the LASO website. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in deeper to LASO itself. The Learning Acceleration Support Opportunities is really T-Class 2.0. So based off of lessons that we learned from T-Class, we are running another common grant application. The goal is really offering a streamlined, consolidated grant application process for LEAs and really focused on a few grant programs that are able to be bundled and really focus on that learning acceleration piece. So through LASO, we have approximately $110 million in services and supports through 8 different grant initiatives. And that is all accessible through one program application. This is, of course, predicated on what we are learning from COVID recovery, knowing that we certainly have a lot of room to grow in both reading and math outcomes for students. And while we've seen a rebound in STAR RLA results, we definitely still need to continue the progress and even push that even further for learning acceleration. And this is doubly true for math as well. So LASO itself will be anchored in 3 key learning acceleration strategies. You'll see 5 here. We're focused predominantly on 3. That's instructional materials, more time, and innovative school models. So across the 8 different initiatives in LASO, they will all have one component of these 3 learning acceleration strategies, if not more. Specifically today, we're talking about more time through the ADSI Planning and Execution Program Summer. So I encourage you to check out all of the other initiatives here on the screen as well throughout the course of this week, either through recordings or through live webinars, and consider them as well. But today we're focused on ADSI PEP Summer. The LASO timeline, we have the application window that just launched on November 7th. That is open until December 22nd. During that time, we'll also have this week of program webinars, and then we'll also have some LEA FAQs or FAQs overall that will be posted, I believe, starting next week. Then we'll go through in 2023, we'll start with any sort of scoring, vetting, interview processes in January. We're anticipating an award announcement that second week of February. And then we'll go through the grant negotiation process in e-grants and issue NOGAs by April 13th. We recognize that this is a tight window for winter break in terms of that December 22nd grant application deadline. Our intent is really to provide as much time as possible for LEAs, give a longer runway than T-class at least for that application completion. And so you'll also see through that application process, which we'll jump to in a bit here. The goal is that we have a little bit of a streamlined application process, so it's fewer narrative responses and more eligibility responses. The application itself was emailed with a unique link to each LEA superintendent on November 7th. If you are unable to access that or receive that application link from the superintendent email, you can also refer to a form posted on the LASO website to get a new link sent out to you all. We also have a PDF, of the application on the LASO website. I do want to note here, formal submission of the application is through the Qualtrics survey, not through the PDF. So PDF is merely a guide as you're going through that process. The actual application itself is the Qualtrics survey. One other thing to note with LASO that's a bit different from T-class. T-class was unique in the aspect of the funding source. So we had a sole funding source essentially for all the initiatives with ESSER. We also had a speed that we were working at to distribute the funding. And in order to accommodate different LEA circumstances, we did allow change requests and declines for LEAs in the T-class process. With LASO, we're not operating under those circumstances. We're going back to that traditional grant process for equity and fairness. What this means is declines and change requests are not advisable in a typical competitive process for that equity and fairness piece. And so if declines are requested, it really will be a case-by-case basis, and it could ultimately raise the LEA's federal grant risk level in the coming year. So really encourage you to work with your team to make sure that the grants that you are applying to make sense for your district as you're going through this process. All right, so that was LASO. We're going to jump into specifically what ADSI PEP Summer actually is, what this means from a program perspective, and what this means from what an LEA would be agreeing to. So at a high level, this grant will offer anywhere from 1 to 3 million of estimated supports for districts. This is an in-kind grant, meaning this specific application process will be access to the program that I'm about to talk about, as opposed to a direct grant amount sent to your LEA. We're anticipating up to 50 LEAs, but anywhere from really 25 to 50 LEAs for that award, depending on capacity. And then from an estimated timeline, this would mean you would undergo a planning year in the 23-24 school year with implementation of your first summer program in the summer of 2024. Again, at a high level, the purpose of this grant program is to support the implementation and planning of an evidence-based summer learning program, really geared towards preventing summer slide, as well as addressing any sort of COVID slide that occurred as well. So LEAs will undergo a year-long planning process to design that research-based summer program and really couple that with implementation of additional days school year funding, which is a a state funding source through 48.0051. And one thing to note there, this grant program is intended to strengthen the implementation of ADSI. However, this grant program is not required for LEAs to access ADSI funding on their own. This is merely meant to provide research-based, evidence-based practices for LEAs and really support that planning process. If you, as an LEA, want to access ADSI funding without this planning process, without this support, that is certainly something that you are able to do. The available supports through this program, however, include a research-based planning process. I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. A community of practice with a growing group of districts that are going through this process, as well as one-on-one technical assistance. So specific vendors, support from specific vendors for that strong summer planning. These are folks who have been very well steeped into the summer research and in the planning process and what that means for Texas LEAs specifically. So we're really excited about the prospect of that funding source. We're still waiting on some final T's and I's, T's to be crossed, I's to be dotted for that funding availability, but we are optimistic that that will be an opportunity for districts in this grant program. So the Strong Summer Program, the ADSI PEP Summer, really focuses on a strong planning process. We have a comprehensive strategic plan that is grounded in research from RAND on what it takes to have a strong summer program. So I have a screenshot here of just one piece of that strategic plan. It's a 3-part plan this year and has different components that really support that planning process throughout the course of the year. One of the pieces around strong summer programming that oftentimes gets pushed to the back burner is planning early and often. And one of the things that we try to support through this grant program is a dedicated space and a dedicated system and structure to ensure that planning process occurs throughout the course of the entire year and doesn't just get pushed to the month of May, for example, right before you're starting your summer program. So we have a continuously honed planning process that has been refined and developed over the course of 3 cycles so far. This will be the 4th cycle of this planning process and is just continuously getting better each cycle that we get. This planning process will then allow participating LEAs to benefit from additional days school year funding. And so this is really that play for long-term sustainability, where we saw through HB3 that we had half-day formula funding available for school systems that want to add instructional days. This is beyond a minimum of 180 days up to 210 total to any of their elementary schools, grades pre-K through 5. So this is the long-term funding source. This is one of the pieces that this planning program will support LEAs in utilizing, in addition to identifying other revenue sources for their summer program. Really, the goal here is to take this additional day school year funding and expand upon it and really make sure that that funding is used to implement an evidence-based program. So what this means is from an eligibility standpoint for this grant program is that any LEA that is intending to use ADSI for a summer program in at least one grade level from pre-K through 5 is eligible. That does mean that you would need to meet ADSI eligibility requirements, namely a 180-day instructional calendar at participating campuses, but that would be in the execution year in 2024, 2025. So a bit more on the actual program requirements here. So it would need to serve at least one grade level within grades pre-K through 5. The campus academic calendar will need to have at least 180 instructional days by the 2024-2025 school year, not including staff development waivers. That is derived from ADSI statute. In addition, that campus will need to have those same 75,600 operational minutes that we operate under. You'll need to be willing to add 25 to 30 additional half days of instruction, those ADSI days in the summer, to the 180-day academic calendar. And then from an ADSI PEP perspective for the actual summer day, this is where we start to really get into the research base. That day must consist of 3 hours of academic instruction, another 2 hours at least of enrichment, and then there's 1 flex hour there. So lunch, transitions, assembly time, all those different components that could be part of that. And so each ADSI PEP summer day must be at least 6 hours. And then the academic hours would be led by a teacher that meets that LEA's regular year certification requirements. Another component of this grant program is the use of high quality instructional materials in the summer program. We have a series of 4 different ways to meet that bar. That includes use of TEA available materials as one of those eligibility components. That also includes being highly rated on the Texas Resource Review or on Ed Reports and aligned to the TEKS, as well as a self-review option that we have available for this grant program. And finally, the ADSI days need to be held on separate days from the regular instructional year. So while it's half-day funding through the funding source, those days do need to be distinct from any other instructional day in the year. To support you through all of these requirements and through all this research base, what we have is the ADSI Planning and Execution Program. And so this is essentially a three-part planning program where we're gearing towards that research base and board approval of a calendar, and then entering annual cycles of continuous improvement. For cycle 1, 2, and 3, our first 3 groups of districts that went through this planning and execution program, that's 3 years of execution. For this group with cycle 4, that'll be a minimum of 1 year of execution, and then year 2 and year 3 are contingent on available funding and available capacity, but a minimum of 1 year of continuous improvement and reflection and revision. There are also some components in there around sharing of data of the strength of your summer program. So we as a team at TEA and as across all of the partners that work with ADSI PEP can also make adjustments to the program and can support as needed to make sure that we're supporting in the most effective way possible. A different visualization of this is an example of what this could look like over the course of the year. Some key milestones in 23-24 would be the identification of a project manager as well as a steering committee, the contracting with technical assistance in August and September. That is contingent on funding, which we do anticipate to be available, but can't officially say give the go ahead there yet. A series of learning community workshops over the course of that planning year. And then really the brunt of the programming is really developing that strategic plan. So SP there stands for strategic plan in 3 parts over the course of that year. In execution years, you'll run your summer program, and then you'll also have some annual reflection opportunities over the course of that year to really hone in on what are the things that you want to focus on the most for the upcoming summer to improve your summer program even more, as well as just a data deep dive into how things are going. And then one more double click into the planning year itself. This is an example of just different components of the planning year that this year's group is going through. So this was created in preparation for an in-person convening that we actually held, what is it now, 2 weeks ago, with cycle 1, 2, and 3 of the planning and execution program. But it gives you kind of a snapshot of all the different pieces that we're looking at and focused on over the course of the year as key milestones. So this group would be officially cycle 4 of ADSI PEP summer. You'll see on the left, we have 65 LEAs currently engaged in cycle 1, 2, or 3 of this planning and execution program. And they're all across the state, ranging in size from a couple dozen students at the entire LEA to some of the largest districts across the state. And so really we are gearing this planning program towards any district out there, rural, urban, suburban, all of the different kind of demographic indicators to really focus on that research base, focus on a strong planning process, and get to a strong implementation of a summer program. To support this, we have a bunch of different partners, an ecosystem of partners here. And so TEA is initiative lead. In previous years, we've had the good fortune of having some funding opportunities from the Wallace Foundation, as well as the support with the Texas Impact Network and Communities Foundation of Texas. Our learning community is run by the Learning Agenda, who have a group of folks who have a bunch of expertise in summer programming and have worked with the National Summer Learning Association in the past. We have a robust system of technical assistance providers who would be that one-on-one support, including Bell Excelix, SCRI, Big Thought, Forum for Youth Investment, 4 Point Education Partners, WestAt, and then also coupled with WestAt is Resources for Learning there. Our research base of the planning process overall is based off of the RAND Corporation research into summer learning, includes research based from some Texas districts. And then we also have an ongoing summer learning study that is studying the implementation of summer programming specifically with this group of districts through American Institute of Research. So really a robust group of partners throughout this entire process. And really what this slide is meant to represent is that this is not just a, hey, we're going to throw you to the wolves and go through a planning process on your own. This is really a joint effort with districts across the state, with partners across the state and across the country to make sure that we are really driving high quality planning and implementation practices. Some current program successes, you'll see that on the slide here. So on the left, you'll see a sample impact report from Cycle 1 LEA with some academic outcomes as well as some quotes there. We have some pictures on the right as well. The top one is some high quality instructional materials implementation at a district in West Texas. And those were very much coupled with high quality enrichment opportunities for students as well. Very inspiring to see. And then the bottom picture there is actually a data meaning making session that was run in our in-person session 2 weeks ago. This is where Cycle 1 and 2 LEAs had the opportunity to really bring all the data sources available and had a dedicated 4 hours to just dive into the strengths of their summer program and areas for improvement, and then use that to hone in on what their key areas of focus were going to be for this upcoming year of planning and actual implementation of that summer program. So an example of the programming piece and some of the stakeholders there involved. So jumping back to the actual grant itself, some of the more specifics. In the grant, you would be agreeing to several different components and encourage you to take a look at the specific program guidelines on the LASO webpage. But we called out several here just to highlight them. First is the creation of a comprehensive cross-departmental strategic plan with 3 anticipated submission dates in 23-24. I do want to emphasize that cross-departmental piece. This has been one of the most, I would say, one of the most important indicators of success for the districts that are going through cycles 1, 2, and 3 right now, is the ability to bring the people that need to be at the table to the table. Anyone from transportation to food services to academics to any other operational pieces to make sure that that summer program goes off with as few hitches as possible. Another key component here is the identification of a project manager. That person will need appropriate autonomy to make and propose solutions and decisions for that summer program, as well as that cross-departmental steering committee. We do recommend and really require the inclusion of someone on the finance team, given that we are using additional day school year funding here. That is half-day funding source, and so there are some additional revenue needs for that summer program as well. Another eligibility component we've talked about is adding 25 to 30 additional days of instruction. You'd be agreeing to participate in all of the learning community sessions in 2023, 2024. We anticipate, we say up here, up to 1 day per month. Those are usually around 4 hours per session, up to 4 hours for a session, and occur up to 1 day per month. We also have occasional project manager meetings as well to support any ongoing questions that happen over the course of that planning year. You'd be agreeing to participate in up to 3 annual reflection and revision processes in the years following the planning year. Agree to utilize high quality instructional materials in the summer program Again, you can find the specific definition of that in the program guidelines on the LASO website, so I encourage you to take a look there. And then assuming all goes well with the funding source, you would also be agreeing to contract with an approved design and implementation partner to support that planning process. And this has been one of the pieces that we hear the most promising feedback from LEAs who have gone through cycles 1, 2, and 3 is how supportive that design and implementation partner has been throughout that process in accounting for barriers and thinking through design implications, as well as really grounding in the research base for your specific LEA. Award prioritization. So we are taking a look at a number of indicators here. Excuse me. The first level of prioritization will be those applicants who are proposing a participating campus or campuses whose academic calendar is already conducting on 180 instructional days. This is not to say that this is a requirement to apply to the program. You don't need to be currently operating 180 instructional days, but you would need to be willing to meet that requirement by the 24-25 school year. That said, we have seen through existing programming that it is much easier to get the finance team buy-in and to build buy-in across all of the stakeholders if that calendar is already at 180 days. So that's our first level of priority. The second is those campuses who are using TEA available materials in the 23-24 school year. So if you're using anything on the TEA available materials list, that would get you higher prioritization. We then will prioritize by percent of students identified as economically disadvantaged. And then percent of participating students as compared to total pre-K-5 enrollment. So in the application, you will be asked to say, what is your anticipated summer enrollment compared to what is your overall pre-K-5 enrollment, and that percentage will then be that last prioritization rank. If after those 4 priorities, we do end up with a tie at the end, however unlikely that might be, the overall size of the program will be considered, with the larger program being awarded first and then the smaller. But that number 4 there would hopefully take care of any sort of actual ties in that rank, that prioritization level. We will not be conducting any interviews as part of this grant, so we'll just be going based off of the application itself. And then let me just walk through the application real quick. So this is the LASO webpage here that I have open right now. So you'll see on this webpage at the top, we have a big red box, so right in your face, and you'll see a couple things. One, a reminder about the application window. Second is that reminder that the link for the application itself is in your superintendent's inbox. If you do not have access to that, there's a form there with a link to request that. And then to see the application questions themselves ahead of actually submitting that Qualtrics survey, there is a link here as that in this third bullet for a PDF version of the application. And so that will take you over to this document here. And so at the top, you'll see welcome to the LASO 22-23 winter cycle grant application. For the ADSI-PEP specific questions, I'm going to scroll us down all the way to page 53. And it's relatively straightforward. We tried to keep it to the information that we need to make a decision on awards and prioritize according to that list that I just outlined. So a couple basic questions around, do you agree to meet the general and fiscal guidelines? Do you agree to meet all the eligibility requirements that we've talked about in this webinar, as well as as you can find in the program guidelines, and those are linked there. And then any assurances as well. Do you agree to meet those assurances? Then you'll be asked to enter the actual number of campuses and the name of that campus, those campuses that you are anticipating to have involvement there. the total number of anticipated students in ADSI summer across all campuses at your LEA, total number of students in grades pre-K through 5 in the entire LEA, and then a question on current number of instructional days in the 22-23 academic calendar for those participating campuses. And then 2 final questions on, do you agree to plan towards a 180-day instructional calendar at the participating campuses by 24-25? And then a last question to get at those prioritization rankings of our participating campuses planning to use TEA, OER, or available materials in the 23-24 school year. And so that will get us to that last piece of prioritization there. ADSI PEP summer is effectively decision 8, which is the 8th of 8 initiative opportunities through LASO. So then you would jump to the final signature and any sort of submission components from your superintendent or designee. Jump back to the deck here real quick. All right, so that was a quick application walkthrough. As you can see, 10 questions, meant to be fairly straightforward and hopefully a light lift for you all. A couple flags here for that, the application itself. The official submission of this application requires a superintendent signature. In the rare case that the superintendent is unable to sign, that LEA should email laso@tea.texas.gov, and they can support you with that. I also want to flag an office hours opportunity that we will have the week after Thanksgiving for each initiative, but for ADSI PEP summer, that office hour opportunity will be on Wednesday, November 30th from 2 to 3 p.m. That link is here in this deck, which we'll be posting to the LASO webpage. And I believe actually that registration is already on the LASO webpage as well. So if you wanted to just go straight to the registration, make sure that's on your calendar, you can get signed up there as well. We'll also be collecting questions and posting those to our FAQ document. And so if you do have questions, please feel free to email adzi@tea.texas.gov and we'll get those on our FAQ document and addressed. As far as next steps, really questions, attend office hours if you're interested. Take a look at the FAQs when those are posted. We anticipate those being posted on Tuesday, November 22nd, or by Tuesday, November 22nd. And then really the final next steps are assess whether this looks right for you or not, and then apply via the LASO application. As I flagged earlier, we're really excited about this program. We think there's a lot of great work happening in districts across the state with summer programming, and this is just magnified through the cohorts that are going through this right now. And in program visits this past summer, we were seeing just some outstanding examples of summer programming, some great opportunities for students across the state, and really believe that grounding the planning process in the research base and in what we know to be true about strong summer programming can really support the actual implementation of strong programs across the state. With that, let me double check. I think that, yes, that is the last slide for me. So I'm going to jump over to questions and any Q&A in the chat. And so bear with me as I synthesize real quick. Question on how can LEAs access ADSI funding without this specific grant? This is pretty simple. Honestly, you need to meet ADSI eligibility requirements. That means have a 180-day instructional calendar at the participating campus. And then you would need to also have a certified teacher or a teacher meeting your LEA's certification requirements, teaching those minimum of 2 hours of instruction on those additional days. Then once you have that, it's as simple as reporting that in PEIMS. And the submission goes through the 4th PEIMS submission. The extended year submission is what it's called, in August at the end of the school year each year. And then you would be eligible for those funding sources. There haven't been any changes. There's a question here on has the actual funding for ADSI itself, the state funding source, the formula funding source, has that changed in the past couple of years? No, that remains the same as it has been from 2019 and with HB3. There haven't been any changes. We have an upcoming legislative session this spring. I can't predict whether there might be some changes or not to that, but that would be something to keep an eye out for. And we would certainly adapt this program to any requirements or any adjustments to that as well. Great question on actual targeted students here. So are all students required to attend the additional 25 to 30 days, or just the students needing acceleration support? This is really part of the planning process. It's not all students, it's the students that you identify as those needing support. Is also one thing I should flag here is that this is by statute, ADSI needs to be optional for students, non-compulsory for students. So part of this planning process is really designing a summer program that is engaging, that is enticing for students to attend, while also really accounting for those learning acceleration needs on the academic side as well. But long answer to the short answer being, you would design your program towards the student population that you have in mind. It wouldn't be all students, or it could be all students if that's what you have in mind as well. If you are in cycle 2 of ADSI right now, can you apply to this funding? This is geared towards new districts to ADSI PEP summer. And so if you're in cycle 2 for ADSI full year redesign, yes, that would be an eligible application. However, if you are currently going through the process, it would be just a repeat of what we've gone through before, with lessons learned over year. But the intent is for new LEAs, new districts to the program. Great questions there. Please keep them coming as they come to mind. All right. Sensing a pause in question answer asking, I'll do a quick kind of synthesis here, but please do keep dropping any questions in the chat if you're in the midst of typing right now. But really appreciate everyone's time today. Please do consider this grant program if you're at all looking at implementing a summer program at one of your elementary campuses in upcoming summers. We do have a lot of success opportunities that we've seen through different LEAs. So highly encourage you to consider this and really explore with your LEA if this is right for you or not. But with that, I see one more question that has come in, but for folks who are just kind of hanging out, that's all the content that we have for today. So appreciate you joining. Question regarding the written response in the Q&A for accessing ADSI without the grant. Applications must be submitted to TEA to receive funding. So there needs to be an application to run ADSI. No, sorry if that's unclear in the Q&A here. There's no application to receive ADSI formula funding. That's just you meet ADSI eligibility requirements and then you report it in PEIMS. The application would be for this specific grant program, for the planning and execution program, not for ADSI funding itself. Good clarifying question. Thank you. All right. With that, please do feel free to email adsi@tea.texas.gov or laso@tea.texas.gov with any lingering questions that you might have. We also have another webinar tomorrow, I believe, if you do feel like joining again, or if you missed the start of this webinar itself. But thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to seeing some applications from folks.